Now, the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, took place in this way. Matthew has a story to tell this morning. It's an unlikely story. For some, an unreasonable story. Even a little scandalous. And it's a story that ends with an adoption. Grace stakes a claim in today's text. Joseph and Mary remain faithful and a child is born. We are witnesses to that adoption this morning for the sake of this young mother and her unborn child. And more importantly, for the sake of the world. Mary and Joseph are engaged. There's a marriage on the horizon. That day hasn't fully arrived yet. Mary and Joseph are bound to one another in this marriage contract. They're engaged, and yet at the same time, they're not living together. And so the news of this child is unexpected. The very existence of this unborn baby is potentially dangerous. Mary and Joseph are engaged, and Joseph isn't the father. They're living in a world where adultery is punishable by death. A stoning is entirely possible. Some amount of disgrace is inevitable. Matthew tells us that Joseph plans to divorce Mary quietly. It's the right thing to do. It's the only thing Joseph can do under the law. Maybe Mary and the baby will be spared. And just as Joseph resolves himself to this course of action, a messenger from God enters this story by way of a dream. A child will be born, a son. And Joseph, you'll call him your own. And more than that, you'll name him Jesus, Jesus, which is Greek for Yeshua, Joshua, which in Hebrew means God saves. And this son of yours, Joseph, that's exactly what he'll do. He'll save his people from their sin, this brokenness, and they'll be captives no more. Now, the birth of the Messiah took place in this way. A life is conceived out of nothing. A life claimed in faith by an act of grace and adoption. This one is claimed who himself comes to save. It's an unlikely story. An unconventional story. For some, even a little scandalous. And it's our story too. As Christians, by the grace of God in Jesus Christ, we have a claim to that story too. Adoption is a subject that hits pretty close to home in my family. My dad was adopted at the age of 10. He was admitted to an orphanage outside of Pittsburgh as an infant. He was listed as an inmate. Earl and Virginia Bothwell adopted Dad at 10. Can you imagine the first Christmas? That first birthday, I'm told, Earl Bothwell bought Dad a ball of every sport. Even a hockey stick. Dad didn't know what a hockey stick was. He'd never seen the game. He'd never had anything of his own, let alone one of everything. He was overwhelmed by grace. Now, Earl Bothwell, unfortunately, passed away just 4 years after Dad was adopted. Virginia eventually remarried a man named Ed Paxton. Ed took Dad in as his own, too. Spent time with him, played catch with him, chopped wood with him. They went on vacations, did stuff together. I believe Ed Paxton taught my father how to be a father. My father has been an amazing father. One day, Dad asked Ed about changing his last name to Paxton. Ed said, "Well, you've already had one name change. Maybe you should stay with the one you've got." And Dad let that lie, and I guess he didn't need it. He knew he was loved. He knew he was known. Just last year, as my father was going through some old documents of my aunt who had recently passed, he found the adoption paperwork. Ed Paxton had adopted my father. Dad never knew. 65 years later, Dad found out he was claimed not once but twice. It seems to me that adoption, in its purest sense, is the kind of claim that grace makes. The giving of oneself for the sake of another. What a gift. The active choosing of another, it's a voluntary thing to adopt. And it's no small thing. There are decisions to be made. There are new responsibilities to consider. There's nothing minor or temporary or impulsive about an adoption. To voluntarily claim another as your own, to make that kind of life-changing commitment, it's the claim of grace. It's the work of love. It's something that can be received only in faith. The more I think about this text, the more it reads like an adoption story. And I'm not talking about Joseph anymore. I'm talking about the incarnation itself. This voluntary act of a loving God for the sake of God's own people. In this Jesus, this child of Mary, conceived by the Holy Spirit, God will live a fully human life, even to the point of death. And in this Jesus, God will show the world another way. A way of life and love, wholeness and healing. I believe you and I are adopted in the waters of our baptisms as sons and daughters of that living God. I believe that's what happens right there. The claim that grace stakes on your life is yours to receive in faith. I'm a Bothwell. I'm a Paxton. Paxton's my middle name. The identity that I claim first claimed me, as it claimed my father before me, twice. I carry those names with me today. It's who I am. I'm all of that and a Christian too. You're a Christian too. You're one of God's own, someone for whom Christ died. You're one of God's own by God's own choosing. You are a child of God, named and known and loved. That, my friends, is the claim of grace we share in Jesus. You and I enjoy a birthright to which we have no right by the grace of God in Jesus Christ. You're free to live into that identity on this fourth Sunday of Advent. every day of the year. You're free to claim that identity as your own, as unlikely or unreasonable or as scandalous as it might seem. That is the gift of this child. God with us. Amen.